Welcome to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Snake Bros! Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you from the 10 by 10 by 10 by 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of weirdness and science.
By 10.
No tangents guaranteed in the tangent cube.
10 by 10. By 10.
This is episode 17.
By 10 by 10 by 10.
Wow, 17.
Come a long way, folks.
Yep, from 2? So what's on your mind this week, man? Anything in the news? Anything in particular? Some science?
Oh, I was trying to find out if there was anything to this Antarctica stuff. You know, pyramids in Antarctica.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know... Oh, mistakey.
Amateur.
Turn my ringer off. Yeah, anyway, you never know, man. Ice cubes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Now, I saw this, like, all these stories from 2016 about how they found this pyramid in Antarctica, and everybody's like, I told you the government's been lying to us forever. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, those are, I remember reading those, and there were also ones about, there was supposedly a pyramid in Alaska as well.
Yeah. But does it really count as a pyramid if it only has 3 sides? Because that's the way it looked. It's like, it's got only 3 phases.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's not a pyramid.
That's one of the platonic solids, though, right?
Yeah.
3-sided. Yeah. I don't know. I
Brenner, stop saying the name of that shape.
It's a triangular horde. I don't know what it is.
Triangulid.
But the one in Alaska was supposedly completely underground too, which I was like, does that really count as a pyramid? I mean,
Right.
like,
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's no way. I had no way of confirming if it was there. Supposedly, the reports were from military guys who were supposedly there to build a secret base. Supposedly,
Right.
And I'm just like, okay, you're already starting with something that can't be confirmed,
Right.
And then you're finding something that can't be confirmed, and it's going to be kept secret by everybody that was ever there ever because everything was secret. So
Right.
But
I just really want somebody to find something in Antarctica. Damn it! Like, get to the land down there under the 2 miles of ice quickly. Someone.
Yeah. Well, and the Russians drilled in the wrong place and found a lake.
Yeah. But there is this weird place on Google Maps in Antarctica it's like there's this crash site. You can see from the pictures, it looks like something crashed there. And there's just stuff scattered all about. And there's the way I found it was there's this really, really long trail of running across.
Clearer pictures?
No, just running across the ice, and it's like a snowmobile trail or some vehicle trail on the ice, and I followed it on Google Earth.
Wow.
And it ends up at this place, and you can see all these tracks, like in this place is a big, long, rectangular thing that has been flattened out or packed down like a runway.
Okay.
It looks like a runway on the ice. And there's just all this wreckage nearby the area that doesn't have, and there's tracks all going around to it. So and then I think I talked to you about it a while back, and I think Russia had been researching some meteor impact there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so we decided that was probably what it was.
Yeah. Maybe but the wreckage is weird.
I mean, it didn't look like, you could just see like black stuff, just like,
Okay.
I
was thinking like that's the runway where they send all the dumbasses that are not supposed to be there. Yeah. Come to this runway, Vector 249.
No, the runway was clean. Like
okay.
That was being used.
Okay, that was the runway they were using to land to go look at the wreckage. Okay.
Yeah, this wreckage, because you could see like this scrape in the ice. I mean, it's huge.
Okay.
Whatever it is.
All right.
black
Yeah,
stuff.
maybe
all
it
over.
is an impact.
I got it marked on my places
Wow.
somewhere in Google Earth.
Well, maybe you can put up a screenshot in the show notes.
Oh, okay. Oh. Put me on the spot. Yeah.
Show us that secret shit.
Okay. Hopefully I described it accurately.
Yeah, so that reminds me, this would normally be like a section of We're Dumb, except it's just me. I'm dumb.
But everybody knows that I'm dumb. That's a given. That's why I don't do those updates anymore.
I was and I should have done this last episode, but in the episode with when we had Archer as the guest, it was STS 80, or I'm sorry, STS 75, not 80. That was the shuttle mission with the tether, and the tether was actually going outwards from the shuttle, outwards farther from Earth. Okay, so I was describing it as the shuttle was dropping it down towards the planet. It was the other way around. The shuttle is actually in low Earth orbit. Is actually still in the atmosphere, in the upper atmosphere, and it was putting the tether out, and it was basically dragging through the Van Allen belts, the radiation belts around the planet.
The
and
ones that keep us from leaving the planet.
yeah, the belts that keep us from leaving this ball. Yeah. So that was, and the mission was actually, the idea was to tether two satellites together. Okay, and so the on the far end of the tether was a satellite, and they were like extending it outwards or whatever, and then they had to let it go because it was like overloading the shuttle. So all that stuff, all the electrical stuff was the same. I just had it backwards.
But I thought I remembered, I guess, when they released it, like you could see it falling. I guess it did fall.
Yes, when they released it, but you were looking at space, not Earth.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess my mind just put
Earth
in there.
Well, yeah, because I was watching the videos again, and you just see blackness, and then there's all this stuff, all these things flying by or whatever,
Yeah.
and
Horseshoe
and
crabs.
You hear the NASA guy go, what is all that flying around in the? And then there's this long silence, and then one of the shuttle guys,
Redacted.
Yeah, one of the shuttle guys comes back on and says, he says there's some debris,
Yeah.
but he just leaves it at that. He's like, well, there, and it's got that, because the recording is from him from space. He's like, well, there's some debris in there.
What do you want?
Redacted.
You will be remembered.
So yeah, I'm dumb. I should have checked that. I should have checked the shuttle mission number, but it's 75, which was in the show notes on that episode. I put it in the notes on the episode. It was STS 75, not 80. But here's the video and here's the pictures and everything.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I appreciate that correction because I didn't remember what it was anyway, but I wouldn't have quoted you, Russ. It's cool because I didn't remember which one you said it was.
also, the other one I was dumb on was I was talking about, and this was earlier actually, this was I think this was episode 14, where I was talking about Black Knight Satellite, and I was talking about I think now I'm gonna have to check this. I think I was talking about the guy who was in orbit, low Earth orbit, and he was coming back down, and he said that there was a bogey on his 6 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That dude was not the first guy in orbit.
Oh.
So and I don't even know why I said that. That was in the Gemini program, which was the orbital stuff, and the Apollo program later was the one that went to the moon. So he wasn't the first in orbit, but he was. I think he did orbit it. I shouldn't even say this now because I'm not sure if it's true. I think he may have orbited it the most times, but I'm not sure. Anyway, at that point he made a record, but don't quote me on that because I'm not sure either. But Dad was telling me like, "Oh, you got this totally wrong," and I was like, "Damn it! I don't even know why I said that."
Yeah. No one ever tells me stuff like that because they just know that I'm dumb. But in the spirit, I suggested we fill a pyramid with liquid water. So
You also said posthumously.
Yeah, posthumously after you're dead.
You're dead. Posthumously.
Yeah, posthumously.
Liquid water.
Sounded good.
Well, I mean, you could have been talking about ice. right? Could fill it with ice cubes.
Yeah, but
The pyramid.
You know, fill it with solid water.
Oh, okay, I got you. Fill it with gas water.
Yeah. So we could build a pyramid and fill it with liquid water.
We put what in the pyramid again? But speaking of Antarctica, we've never gone over the whole mystery of the maps.
I talked about them briefly when I was reading that, listening to the computer voice tell me about that book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was Charles Hapgood.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and he was actually a professor. I don't know what university he was at, but he basically found out about the what is it? The Library of Congress. The United States Library of Congress had this immense map collection that goes all the way back to before the founding of the country, because it was standard for any port of call to, like, so if you were a captain of a ship, right, sailing the high seas, and you made port in any major, any nation or whatever, there was this sort of tradition that the various nation states had, where to make port and to, like, to get to be able to be allowed in their port, because they have navies and everything guarding their shores, to be allowed in the port, you had this deal where you basically, and the United States did it like this, you basically gave them your maps, or you made copies and gave them the copies. So every ship that came in was required to, like, share their maps of the world. And this goes back from before the 13 colonies that were united, everything. So the Library of Congress has this immense map collection. They still have it, coming from all kinds of weird sources, pirates, freaking like people with private merchant shipping, Navy ships from other countries, just everybody that came, and presumably some people tried to hide some maps and gave some over or whatever, but because back in the day, when the Earth was still not explored completely, these could be state secrets, like having a map that showed you, or like if you had gone and done all this exploring and spent all this money, like usually governments would fund people to go explore. That's how Columbus got over here. It cost a lot of money, and it was really risky because those ships could sail off and just never come back.
Right.
So some maps were considered state secrets, and so presumably people would hide them and try to. But anyway, the United States Congress has a ton of maps, and Hapgood became fascinated with this, with some of these older maps that he was looking at that seemed to have anomalous data in them, right? And I have some notes.
I thought, I could be wrong about this, but I thought somebody gave him or showed him the map. Like somebody showed it to him and was like, I think this is Antarctica, like on this map. And he didn't actually believe it at first. He was just like, all right, well, we're going to try to figure out what this is.
Yeah, so there's a great article from Ancient Origins, which is a website we reference often. And they have a new article on this, and so I'm going to be referencing that, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes. But basically, they're talking about the beginning, how this map came to everybody's attention. So this one is Turkey's National Museum. Okay, there was a guy whose job was basically to go through all of their documents and classify them. They had all these documents that were unclassified, just piles and piles and piles of them. So he's going through them one at a time, like, oh my God, what is this one, And he pulls towards him this rolled up thing of deerskin. And he unrolls it, and it is, let's see, the full dimensions of it were 2 feet by 3 feet. Okay, and it was from 1513. It was the map from Piri Reis. And Reis is actually the title of admiral from the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so Piri was his name. Reis was the title of. So Piri, people call him Admiral Piri Reis. It's like Admiral Piri Admiral.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
How do you spell his name?
Piri is P-I-R-I and Reis is R-E-I-S. That's how. Okay. That's the Englishanized version. Englishanized.
Piri Reis.
Yeah, Piri Reis. Yeah. So and Reis basically was admiral. So he was a pirate with his dad. Okay. And his dad was a famous not famous to us, but at the time he was famous. Then they did so much awesome stuff that the Turkish or the Ottoman Empire was like, hey, why don't you help us make our navy badass?
Yeah.
So they joined and became admirals, right? And they basically went back to doing the same thing they had done, but with the blessing of the government, which when you do that, you're called a privateer. So you're a pirate or a privateer. Like a privateer is like just like a pirate, but he does it with the sanction of the government. So they were doing that, and then his dad gets killed in a battle, and he retires from the Navy and becomes a cartographer, right? Because he two things that interested in him in the like naval stuff, and one was explosives. He loved building weird things to put in their cannons, right? They would surprise because they would go boom, boom, blow up, and then throw all this crap everywhere and tear up people's sails. He specialized in this thing, and this was probably not just him, but he did this thing where he'd put chains in there that had ball weights on the end, so they would shoot it out of their cannons, and it would go, and all these chains would come out and it'd just tear your mast down.
Wow.
Right? And they'd put you dead in the water, and then they just destroy you. So yeah, he loved bombs, but he also loved maps. And he was a perfectionist, and so he retires from the like all the naval battles and everything, and goes back to Constantinople, which was Istanbul, right? Had been taken over. So he goes back to Istanbul and he starts doing cartography. And this is at the same period where Columbus is doing his explorations. Okay, so this is right around the 1500s.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not really clear if the source maps that he was using may have come from, because there was one period, there was one of Columbus's explorations where he actually got boarded and a bunch of stuff was stolen, including his maps. Mm-hmm. Or I think it was not his ship, but one of his ships, and they tried to throw the map overboard, but it was too late and the map got taken. So he might have been using that one, which is interesting because that implies that Columbus had maps that already showed the old world, right? Because the Piri Reis map that this guy in Turkey, the one he found, shows the eastern coast of South America going all the way down,
Right.
and then like the north. I think it's the coast of what they call in Antarctica Queen Maud Land.
Right.
Okay, and it's weird looking when you look at it. I'll put this picture in the show notes. It's very strange looking, and that's because first of all you have to remember it's just one fragment of the entire map. You're looking basically at the lower left-hand corner, or maybe not even the lower left-hand corner, but it's on the left. Right, it may not be the lowest part, but it's, let's see what the name of it is called. It's a specific type of projection. Let's see. Where is it at here?
I thought it was that part that they think is Antarctica was actually done on it was a spherical projection.
Yeah, it's called an equidistant projection, okay? So yeah, it says one of the oddities about the Piri Reis map was that it had been drawn using an extremely sophisticated projection. An equidistant projection depicts the features of the Earth from a single point on its surface. This projection can be calculated from any spot on the globe. So the most familiar equidistant projection is the blue and white flag of the United Nations, which is centered on the North Pole. Like you recognize that. Mm-hmm. That's an equidistant. So and it makes the continents that are far away from that point kind of look weird. And
Yeah.
so that's part of the reason why this fragment of the Piri Reis map looks strange, right?
But that's not the only projection in the map. According to the book, what's the guy's name? Hapgood?
Yeah, Charles Hapgood.
There were multiple layers of projections.
Yeah.
Because he I guess the map that Hapgood was analyzing was a compilation of all these different maps that Piri Reis had sort of put together.
Yeah,
supposedly.
so the map, yes, that's right. So the map that they're looking at has multiple projections in it. You can see two of them on the map. There's two circles that are projection points.
Okay.
But I think what they're talking about is the specific source map that this information came from used an equidistant. And so Hapgood was trying to figure out
where that source map,
where the projection started from. What was the projection point from this?
Exactly.
And of course, remember that he's analyzing this based on the Piri Reis map, which is covered in all these other layers of stuff.
Right. And they started figuring out, like it's crazy, like listening to that book, how you get this idea that they're pulling these layers out of this map.
Yeah.
And they all have different projections, and they can figure it out. And it's like, okay, when you're looking at this coastline, north is this way.
Yeah.
And they can measure it all, and it's extremely accurate, but the longitude is a little off.
Right.
So they're like, okay, that must have been made around this period when longitude was such and such, like, badly done or whatever.
Right. So before, I think it might be the 1700s or the 1800s or so. Like there was what they call the problem of the longitude, and longitude are the lines that go vertically. Right. And so it's easy to get your latitude because that you can just do that with the sextant and the compass and the sun. Right. You can figure your latitude based on the sun, but the longitude, because the Earth is rotating, you have to have a good timepiece, a watch or a clock or something that can tell you exactly what time it is, and you keep track of it all the time. And like, I think the accuracy needed to be within a second every month or something like that, which they didn't have.
Right.
You know, I mean, most of their clocks were based on things swinging, and when you're on a ship, everything's freaking swinging, and you can't, so you can't keep so there were countries that were offering huge rewards for anyone who could build a timepiece that would allow their ships to go out and make accurate maps, because they would, without longitude, and remember that's east-west.
Right. So it's spinning.
Yeah, it's east-west and it's spinning, and so you go out and you're making maps of all this crap, and then like other people are using your maps and they run in, they're expecting it way farther or way closer because you didn't actually know where you were.
In the middle of the night, they get
smashed into it. Yeah.
So yeah, like going north and south. For example, at night, when if you're in the northern hemisphere, you can look at Polaris, the North Star, and based on its position, you can the angle of its position.
That's what a sextant is for.
Right. Yeah. You can figure out your location north and south on lines of latitude.
Yeah.
But they couldn't do that the other way because everything's moving in that direction.
Not only you are moving, but so is the Earth spinning, and so like it's constantly changing, and without a proper timepiece to tell you exactly what time it was. So longitude is way off really all the way up until the 1800s. It's like Columbus went out and tried to map what he was seeing, and his maps are terrible. Like
right.
Okay. So the question is how in 1513, like far before anybody could do any kind of longitude mapping, did this guy Peary, an admiral of the Ottoman Empire, draw a map that, number one, shows the entire coast of South America. No, I mean, like at that point, if we're to go with the standard model story, at that point Columbus had just barely gotten there and had just kind of gone. I think the farthest he made it was Venezuela. Okay, so he didn't even know the entirety of the coast of South America.
Right.
So
that was in the late 1400s.
Right. So Peary Race is drawing this map that shows the entire thing of South America, and it's extremely accurate.
Right.
So I mean, just ignoring Antarctica altogether, because Antarctica was not discovered until like, what was it, 1880?
I don't know. So
1888, something like that. But yeah, they didn't even know it was there at all until the late 1800s. But he draws this map that not only shows a very accurate coastline of South America all the way down, but then shows this portion of the continent of Antarctica. But not only does it show the continent of Antarctica, but it shows the coastline, the actual land coastline, which, since it's been discovered and since as far back, since at least all the way back to the Ice Age and probably before that, it's been covered in ice. Like the coastline you can't see it.
Right.
So that's what's fascinating about Hapgood's.
There's like supposedly 2 miles of ice on top of the coastline.
Right, and it sticks way out into the ocean. Yeah. So,
but there were also rivers and some mountain ranges shown.
Yep. Let's see. There's two very interesting things in this article. So the general public first learned of the existence of the Peary Race map in the 27th of February 1932 issue of the Illustrated London News. Entitled A Columbus Controversy, America, and Two Atlantic Charts, the article noted that Columbus got little further than the mouth of the Orinoco in Venezuela in his voyage along the coast of South America in 1498, so that the stretches of the South American coast given in the Peary Race's chart must have been copied from other sources, okay? In the July 23rd edition of the magazine, Akura Yusuf, president of the Turkish Historical Research Society, wrote a more detailed account. The author pointed out a significant fact, quote, "The map in our possession is a fragment. If the other fragments had not been lost, we should have in our possession a Turkish chart," which, Ottoman, drawn in 1513, representing the old and new worlds together. So then we go to the U.S. Navy's Hydrographic Office, which is full of like cartographic experts, people who are, that's what they study as maps. Okay, so an amateur scientist by the name of Captain Arlington Mallory made it his mission to determine the age of the source maps used by Perry Race. So now we're talking not about the Perry Race map, but about his sources.
Right.
Okay. So radical were his conclusions that he hesitated to reveal them. In August 1956, he finally decided to reveal his findings on a radio show sponsored by Georgetown University. He explained that in June of 1954, he was working in the map room of the Library of Congress, okay, when his friend, the chief engineer of the Hydrographic Office, quote, handed me a copy of a map which had been sent to him by a Turkish naval officer. He suggested that I examine it in light of the information we already had on these ancient maps. After making an analysis of it, I took it back to him and requested that the officer check both the latitude and longitude and the projection. When they asked me why, I said, there is something in this map that no one is going to believe coming from me, and I don't know whether they'll believe it even coming from you. That was the fact that Columbus had with him a map that showed accurately the Palmer Peninsula in the Antarctic continent. Okay. So he goes on to, so...
Columbus had it with him?
So this is the idea that Columbus had it with him and it got stolen. And then it ended up in Perry Race's library there in Constantinople, Istanbul. And he was...
So the idea now is that he didn't actually make it?
No. That was one of his sources. And Columbus had an ancient map.
Right.
That's the idea, is that because a lot of people have asked, like, how did Columbus... There's this idea that Columbus knew where he was going because he had gotten his hands on some ancient maps.
Yes.
Right? So one of those maps, at least one of them, gets stolen, ends up... And it gets stolen by, like, Turkish pirates, okay? It ends up over there in Istanbul, and Perry Race is looking at it. He realizes it's an ancient map, and he's incorporating it into his map.
His world map.
Right, into his globe map, and that's how he gets this weird, these pieces of information that are from a particular projection that he was not using over the entire map onto his map, okay? So the host of the radio show says, you say that these maps have been checked by the Hydrographic Office at the U.S. Navy? And Walter says yes. And the host says, as far as you are concerned, they are accurate? And Walter says, yes, they are. The host says, how old are these maps? Walter says, these maps go back 5,000 years and even earlier, but they contain data that may go back many thousands of years previous to that. So they dated the map, the source map, as being 5,000 years or older, but that the mapping was done many, many thousands of years before that.
Yes.
Okay. So
now, is this prior to Hapgood's work, or is this after? Like these
this is before. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's see. Mr. Mallory, the host says, Mr. Mallory, this must then lead to the conclusion that there were competent explorers and map makers along the coast of the Atlantic long before Columbus. And Mallory says, several thousand years before. Not only explorers, but they must have also had a very competent and far-flung hydrographic organization, because you cannot map as large a continent as Antarctica as we know they did probably 5,000 years ago. It can't be done by any single individual or small group of explorers. It means an aggregation of skilled scientists who are familiar with astronomy as well as the methods required for topographic surveying. Okay, a huge group of people. So, Charles Hapgood's students, one of his students told him about the radio broadcast. He was fascinated, and he just goes to investigate the map. Okay. So since Mallory had used the U.S. Navy for his investigations, Hapgood decided to get a second opinion from the Cartographic Office of the Strategic Air Command, which is the U.S. Air Force.
Yeah.
All right. This is the this is my favorite part of this, which I use for any scriptards when they're like, "Oh my God, that's not what it is." I'm just like, "Yeah, read this letter." This is what the USAF Lieutenant Colonel Harold Z. Ohlmeyer wrote to Hapgood on the 6th of July in 1960. Dear Professor Hapgood, your request for evaluating certain unusual features of the Perry Race world map of 1513 by this organization has been reviewed. The claim that the lower part of the map portrays the Princess Martha coast of Queen Maud Land, Antarctica, and the Palmer Peninsula is reasonable. We find this the most logical and in all probability the correct interpretation of the map. The geographic detail shown in the lower part of the map agrees very remarkably with the results of the seismic profile made across the top of the ice cap by the Swedish, British, Norwegian expedition of 1949. This indicates the coastline had been mapped before it was covered by the ice cap. The ice cap in this region is now about a mile thick. We have no idea how the data on this map can be reconciled with the supposed state of geographic knowledge in 1513. Signed, Harold Z. Ohlmeyer, Lieutenant Colonel USAF Commander. Done.
Yeah.
Done. Like, that's the Navy and all their experts, and the U.S., the Air Force and all their experts, and they both agree, like, yeah, that's Antarctica. But
I love how people in the military have no problem being like, I have no idea how this could be, sir. You know what I mean? Like, you ask a scientist and they're like, well, it must be. They give you, like, you know, they have to.
that is correct, sir. It is very mysterious, and I have no idea how it could be, sir.
I love it.
Yeah. So, the people who are writing this article that I'm reading this from, okay, used all this information to talk about Atlantis. All right, and they published. Let's see. Our adventure with studying the ancient maps began in the summer of 1977 when Hapgood replied to an article we wrote outlining our belief that Antarctica was once the site of Atlantis. We concluded that Hapgood's theory of Earth crust displacement was the missing link that could unravel the mystery of the lost continent. So he writes them a letter, okay? And he says, I am astonished and delighted by your article which arrived here today. Believe it or not, it is the first truly scientific exploration of my work that has ever been done. You have found evidence for crust displacement that I did not find. However, it would have seemed you are not aware of a book I published in 1966 entitled Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. Since you are considering presenting your article to the Royal Geographical Society, of which I was a member until I stopped paying my dues, you should examine this book, and I am mailing a copy of it to you. So that's cool. So these people, like, started up a.
Wait, this is recent? They sent Hapgood?
No, this was in 1977.
Okay, in 77. Is
Right,
Hapgood still alive?
I don't know. I don't know if he's still alive. But he says, what I found after long research was that many maps considered of medieval or Renaissance origin are in fact copies of maps drawn in very remote antiquity, and among them is one showing a deglacial Antarctica. I was able to solve the projections of these maps with the help of a mathematician and have them confirmed by the cartographic staff of the Strategic Air Command at Westover Air Force Base in Massachusetts. Let me congratulate you on the work you have done. Sincerely, Charles H. Hapgood. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that was badass. Like, in the book, he's trying to find, he talked to his mathematician about actually putting, because the map didn't have lines, right, of
Right.
longitude and latitude drawn on it.
right, it had projection lines, but no longitude.
Right.
and
So
latitude,
he was wanting to do this, and he talked to a mathematician who could do, like, the trigonomic projection or whatever.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, well, I need, 2 points or something, and
Yeah.
like, he basically gave him the criteria that he needed in order to do an accurate projection. And so Hapgood spent years, like, with his students,
Yeah.
and they were just like studying and testing all this stuff, and that's how the layers start coming out of them. They're like, wait a minute, this coastline, this is mapped totally different.
Yeah.
And they start figuring all this stuff out, and they finally find these points, the criteria that the mathematician needed, and he sent it over to the mathematician, who didn't actually know this was an ancient map.
Right.
And the guy does this trigonomic.
Yeah, it's like spherical trigonometry, which
Yes.
is like really, really hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he put the projection over it, and they get it back, and all their brains exploded. Like, they just were
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah, it says Charles Hapgood explained to Arch C. Gerlach, which was chief of the map division of the Library of Congress, that the Piri Reis map, quote, required more astronomy than was known in the Renaissance. The mathematics required that whoever constructed it had to know the linear distance from Syene to the North Pole to within a degree of accuracy. Piri Reis did not know this, and neither did Columbus.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the article goes into where was this point of projection. Okay, Hapgood, and this is what you're talking about. Hapgood and his students spent months trying to determine the exact center of Piri Reis map. Okay, so they were convinced that it was the city of Syene. I think that's how you say it. And the reason they thought that was the city of Syene where. I don't know if I should even try to say this name.
It'll probably be better than the computer voice pronounced all that stuff.
Eratosthenes, the librarian and father of geography, had made his famous calculations about the size of the Earth. Okay, so that's where this guy lived. Hapgood submitted this suggestion to the cartographic crew at the Westover Air Force Base, and Captain Burroughs concurred. He wrote, Piri Reis's use of the Portolano projection, that's what it's called, centered on Syene, Egypt, was an excellent choice. Okay, so
So the center of the map is in Egypt.
right. The Egyptian
Yes.
city of Syene. Despite the fact that professionals had verified Syene as the center of the map, Hapgood remained skeptical. He thought that the ancients would have been more likely to use the Tropic of Cancer, which divides the tropical from the temperate climate zones. Hapgood was certain that such an important global marker would have been highly significant to these ancient navigators. Today, the Tropic of Cancer lies near Syene, but not precisely over it. The difference in distance is small, but Hapgood and his students wanted to be exact in their calculations. There was considerable debate whether or not to use the measurement from the ancient city or from the climactic marker. Hapgood mistakenly assumed that it had to be an either-or choice between Cyene or the Tropic of Cancer. This was a false choice because there was at a time when the Tropic of Cancer did lay directly over Cyene.
The tilt of the Earth.
Yeah, the clue to that synchronicity of time and place lies within the very projection of the Peri-Race map. But first, a critical question must be answered. When did the Tropic of Cancer and Cyene last share the same latitude?
Yeah, that's a 44,000 year cycle or something. Holy shit.
Right, but it actually, what's fascinating is it's not that long ago. Cyene is 38 minutes and 30 seconds from today's Tropic of Cancer. So they go through a whole bunch of math, which I won't go into here because math is really confusing on in audio. But basically, we discover that the answer is about 5,775 years ago. That is circa 3,760 BC, which is noteworthy that the Jewish calendar begins on this date. The projection of the Peri-Race points like an arrow at a pivotal turning point in human history. Archaeology teaches that Egyptian civilization dawned circa 3,800 BC.
Oh, man.
So, and remember
badass.
that the Egyptians say what? That their civilization is a legacy from a much more ancient one.
Right.
The Zep Tepi, the time
Right,
of
the time.
Yeah.
The first time.
The time of the gods. So this map was probably made by them using even more ancient source maps that they had from the time of the gods. And then it, over the next 5,000 years, ends up either in Columbus's or Peri-Race's hands, which then ends up in our hands with the Peri-Race projection map. Okay.
Yeah, that's incredible, dude.
This is like, what? So you have these people pulling layers out of this map. This guy who made the map was pulling layers out of some other map that was made from some people who had pulled layers out of even older maps.
Yeah, that's freaking badass.
And that's how it can show the coast of Antarctica without ice. Because we know that, like, we basically know that 5,000 years ago, there was still ice there.
Right.
So they couldn't have done, well, I mean, unless they had advanced technology. Because the way we found the coastline was by doing, soundings and stuff. You have to do a bunch of radar crap.
Right.
Okay. So, we're way over time here, but I just want to say that the last bit here, the Scriptard answer to this is that the guy who made the map was running out of paper, and so he just kind of curved South America around the bottom.
Yeah. Doing no science, just skirp-derping everything.
Right, and they say, and that makes a pretty accurate depiction of South America. And I'm like, okay, first of all,
You should be eaten by snakes.
that's right. First of all, Peri-Race had a reputation in all of his other maps, because there's a bunch made by him. In all of his other maps, he is like a perfectionist. Like OCD style. A perfectionist does not curve his map around at the bottom because he's running out of paper. Okay, that's just fucking ridiculous. And the second thing is it's still, even if that's what happened, it still doesn't explain how somebody in 1513 could make a adequately accurate map of South America when he didn't know anything about South America because nobody had supposedly been there yet, because Columbus hadn't even fucking been there.
Yeah.
So even their explanation doesn't have an explanation.
Yeah, screw them. There's badass people doing science here, and that's who I'm paying attention to.
Yeah, and lastly, that completely ignores all the stuff from these like massively expert cartographers from both the Navy and the Air Force that are like, yeah, that's totally what it is, sir.
We have no idea how that could have possibly been, sir.
Yeah. So that's the mystery of the ancient maps. And we're gonna take a break, and we'll be back.
We have no idea how long this break will be, sir. But we will be back, sir. Yes, sir. Snake Bros! Hailing from the 10 by 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 10 tangent cube of science. Trying to put a spherical projection on our cube.
Sir, yes, snakes!
Sir, yes, snakes! Trying to figure out where we are located within the tangents.
That's right, we're trying to use a Portolano projection.
So this is a very fascinating subject to me for many reasons.
Maps.
Maps. I would love how to learn to use a sextant.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, that's not really what I wanted to talk about. I have an excellent timepiece, and I know how to find Polaris, but I don't know what the South Pole star is.
Yeah, I don't think there is a South Pole star.
Not right now, anyway.
Right, but there is the Greater and Lesser Magellanic Clouds, which are actually the galaxy of Andromeda.
Oh, okay, so it's kind of a...
You can only see it from the Southern Hemisphere and the Southern Cross. I think they use the Southern Cross too.
Okay.
And I have no idea what those. I don't know what those look like. I know kind of what the Magellanic Clouds look like. They're two clouds of stars.
Two clouds. Yeah, I know what a cloud looks like. I've been checking it out in my brain since episode 13.
That looks like a puppy dog.
Yeah. But let's see, where did I want to go with this? Antarctica.
Oh yeah.
So a couple of things occurred to me, and you already kind of mentioned one of these, but Hapgood, in his book, he's talking about how this map could have existed back then, and no one knows. And
Yeah.
he's like, basically, the only way, I guess, the projection of it was so accurate that they had to have. I mean, they had their longitude down ridiculously
yes,
accurate. I mean,
yeah,
it was like in today's standards.
Yeah, I mean, like even when we first started getting longitude correct in the late 1800s, it still wasn't as accurate as the source map that Piri Reis used.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean they were really 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 good at it. Yeah,
Right.
We've only matched it basically in the 1900s. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he was talking about. Of course, there's the timeline. That geology and geologists give us for the last time the ice was ice free as
Yeah.
far as we may know.
Yeah, and that's actually controversial, but yeah, go ahead.
Right, it is.
Yeah.
But they were talking about possibilities, like when
Yeah.
could it possibly have been ice free?
Yeah.
And some people had said near the end of the last ice age, right, 11,600 to 12,400 years ago or something like that.
Okay, as far as I remember, and I'm not totally sure on this, but as far as I remember, it hasn't been free in the Holocene, which is the last 10,000 years.
Right.
That's what I think I remember. And so previous to that was the Pleistocene, and that was the Ice Age, going back to 30,000 years or so. So it probably wouldn't have been free then either, because the ice caps were huge. So I mean, we may be talking about 40,000 years ago. But that was thunder.
Yeah, there is
Probably
thunder
didn't
out
get
there.
picked up on the mics, but scared me. So, but don't quote me on that because it's entirely possible because of the climactic optimum that happened at the beginning of the Holocene, basically after the end of the Younger Dryas, when the temperatures shot way, and it was much warmer than it is now. It's very possible that. So 10,000 years ago, it was the coastline.
The coastline, yeah, that's what
Could
we're
have been
talking
free of ice if it was in the same position.
about. Now, there's the other thing I thought of too is that during the period of the Ice Age, when there was, maybe not the glacial maximum, but
Right.
the period, say, after the Younger Dryas.
Okay. Well, after the Younger Dryas was the Holocene, it's starting the last period.
What was the period then? I thought it was the Younger Dryas that.
was the anomalous short 1,000-year-long resurgence of the Ice Age after this long warming?
Right, so the ice came back, right?
Yes.
So that's the period I'm talking about. Like, if the warming during the long warming period was enough to melt the coastline.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And then the resurgence, the ice went elsewhere,
oh.
right?
Oh. Okay. All right.
So it's since then it's like, okay, after the Younger Dryas, the supposed possible cataclysm that caused the end of that could have disrupted the stable ice in that time period again to then melt it, then it evaporates, and then it re-precipitates down into Antarctica, covering the coastline.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
So there was that idea I thought of, but then the other thing I thought of, which is what you had mentioned, was once again we are assuming that the people who had these the ability to map this thing.
Didn't use radar or whatever. Yeah.
Right. We're assuming they didn't have a way to know
Right,
where the coastline was.
Yeah, so even though they're like, so they must have had all this science and all these scientists and the ability to do all this math and everything and sail the whole world, but they didn't have.
But they couldn't have done that.
Right. They couldn't have used radar to see below. Yeah.
Right. Because they weren't putting satellites up and stuff. And,
Right. Well, and I mean, even the in the letter from the colonel at the Air Force, he mentions the British. I can't remember what it was. The British something Norwegian expedition.
Right.
They didn't have satellites at that point. It was 1929 or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
But they were basically going around and let's see. Was it sounding?
Were they flying over it? We don't know.
Right.
That's the truth, folks.
Yeah.
But the point is that we have this. I say we. There's a tendency in our culture to just
Assume.
to sort of assume this linear development type of thing, and then even when there's evidence presented that maybe it's not so linear in terms of technological or cultural advancement, that there were other cultures, like, we look at Rome or we look at ancient Egypt and it's like, okay, well, they were very advanced, but then they fell, right? But even when we think of them, I'll just say myself, right? Instead of putting this on all of you who I don't know how you.
By the way, it was the British, Norwegian, Swedish expedition of 1949, which they did have radar. That was so it's the World War II is over, right? So they had radar. So that's probably what they used. It was. He said it was the geographic details shown in the lower part of the map agrees very remarkably with the results of the seismic profile made across the top of the ice cap by the Swedish, British, Norwegian expedition of 1949. So it was a seismic profile. So they were either doing soundings using explosives or whatever, or like when earthquakes happen, you can use seismic readings. So they're putting up seismographs all over the place and getting the coastline. Okay, so anyway, sorry. Continue.
No, that's cool.
Continue.
Yeah, I was just thinking that still, like, when sort of my knee-jerk thing is to, and it is no longer this way, but it had been in the past, even thinking about an advanced civilization in the past, it's like I wouldn't think of them initially as more advanced than us. It would just be like, well, they were advanced.
Yeah.
Right, and this is typically the way that the standard model or science today looks at them. Like, if the Egyptians were advanced, right?
Yeah. But they still wore butt flaps.
Right, but they were still primitive in many respects. So once again, with this situation, they're looking back and saying, well, they had all these abilities to do this, and you can almost hear that they're saying, well, they had to have done it with ships that were floating and using sails.
Right. That's
Right?
true, yes.
They don't. There's just no. They have this piece of evidence that shows their technology was good enough to do this, and so they think of the most primitive ways we would have done it.
Yeah.
Like the very initial
that's
technology that we would have gotten that would have enabled us to do this, and that's what they're sort of projecting on this.
And then they have to assume that it must have been free of ice, because even if
That's what I'm saying, right?
So like they sailed there in ships with sails, wooden ships with sails, and it must have been free of ice because they couldn't have done
They
seismic
had
surveys.
some large timepiece in the ship, cranking away on its many gears.
Yeah, that's true.
and
Yeah.
cogs.
Yeah, we didn't have timepieces good enough to do it until we could start building. We could practically be building iron ships.
Right. And I understand the tendency to do this, but I tried to ask the question now, like, well, why do we assume this? Like, there's just mounting evidence
Yeah.
that they were that these cultures in the past, in the deepest antiquity, were able to do things that we're not really sure if we could do, and even if we're sure that we could do them, they're not economically feasible
Right.
for us to do.
Yeah.
Right, where it's like, yeah, we could do that, but we won't. It's kind of like when you get hypnotized. They hypnotize you and they say, you're not going to open your eyes. And you're like, I could open my eyes, but you won't.
Right. You don't.
You don't do it.
Yeah. We could build that pyramid, but we don't. Yeah. I was listening to another presentation from Graham Hancock, and he was talking about the accuracy of the Great Pyramid, just in terms of its orientation to true north.
Yeah.
Right. Like 3/60ths of a degree is the amount that it's off for that, and for a structure that has a a footprint that is 14 fucking acres. Like, think about that. It's 14 acres at the base, and they have it at. It's just three, some ridiculous three. Is it hundredths of a degree? 3/10. I think it's 3/10 of a degree off. It's tiny. We've never matched it.
Right.
Never matched it even with much smaller buildings. Like I think some of the examples are the Capitol, and the White House or whatever, which are like they tried to really align those, and they're not nearly as accurate.
Right.
And this building is 14 acres in size, and he was basically saying we could do that today, but the architect would say, why do you want to do that?
Why? Yeah. Because that would take so much more time and money just to make that
and to
accurate.
maintain it as you build the structure. Yeah,
Right.
And then it survived thousands and even just going by the standard model, 5,000 years, probably a lot longer than that, and it's still 3 freaking whatever a degree off. It's like that's ridiculous. Like it probably was perfect. But it's gone through all these earthquakes and everything, so it's probably like it's turned a little bit.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Maybe the Earth has changed.
The pole has changed slightly.
The
Who
actual
knows?
North Pole, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it? Was it that huge earthquake in Japan that caused the giant tsunamis recently? And was it 2011, 2013 maybe?
Yeah, I don't remember.
The one that like made everybody like Fukushima, like the
Yeah.
Okay, I remember reading that earthquake was so powerful that it lengthened the year by some millionth of a second or something like that. Now think about that. Like that sounds tiny, but that earthquake actually slowed the Earth down and lengthened our entire year by some millionth of a second or whatever. Like some.
So that's crazy. Like to think about that. Like we have this motion, this spinning motion, and if you imagine, say, like a spinning balloon or a ball,
Yeah.
and then you were to hit the ball with a hammer and make it vibrate like a bell, that some of that spinning motion would be slowed into this inward and outward flexing of the ball.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy, dude.
Yeah, it is.
Holy shit.
So it's entirely possible. The reason I brought that up, it's entirely possible that the North Pole has shifted. The actual North Pole, not magnetic, which we know wanders.
Right.
Yeah.
But back to this. This is why I started the whole thing, and you were asking me what I've been looking at, and I was just like, I was looking up Antarctica, and it's just interesting that you were in the meantime looking up these maps. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But I really want somebody to go down there to the coast and drill through that freaking ice.
Yeah.
And like get on the shore and start digging, through the
Yes.
ice on the top of the land. I'm dying to know if there's like, structures and artifacts and things there. Like we don't know what's there. It's a freaking massive continent.
Right. It's two huge land masses separated by a deep channel between them. Right. But this is the thing. Like that ice is massive.
I know.
Any structure on the surface. I mean, unless it was
I see what
built
you're
by the
saying.
gods, it would be ground to dust.
But yeah. But if
Yeah, so I agree though.
But if it was laid down slowly, one grain of snowflake at a time, perhaps they're just shrunken now.
just crushed,
Yeah,
tiny,
it's
very tiny,
made of wood, and the wood is very dense.
Yeah, we found a
and
very small pyramid.
We found a chapel, a cathedral made of toothpicks.
Yeah, but the ice flows off the highest parts because it's mountainous.
Yeah.
And the ice flows off of that towards the ocean.
So you're telling me my dream is destroyed?
Yeah.
Damn it.
Well, I mean, did I ever show you the pictures I have they're from somewhere in Canada where there's it's this granite outcrop, but it looks like okay, imagine a piece of clay, like a piece of wet clay, and you've got it all smoothed into this like uniform like a mound, and then you took your fingers and put them on the top of it, and then just like pulled them down it and left these 4 very smooth, even like troughs in it.
Yeah.
There's a giant granite outcrop in Canada that looks like that all along it because of the ice just moving down it slowly.
shit.
It just grounded into these humongous troughs that are perfectly smooth. They look like they were carved by somebody, but it was just the movement of the ice. And like, so I'm just like, you know, and once again, Graham Hancock says this, like anything beneath that ice was ground into dust. This is why it's just ridiculous when they're like, where are the potsherds? Show me the potsherds. And you're just like, bro, ice.
But aren't there? I remember reading or hearing about this, like in Greenland, the glacier that's melting.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my God! It's receding back. They're finding ruins and stuff under there. There's like a whole freaking village or some shit that's being revealed as the ice is melting away. Now,
Okay.
I'm not imagining like grass huts all together and
Right.
stuff, but
That's
it found these remains of
yeah, but they're okay. I think I know what you're talking about, but it's piles of stone. Like there's no
Yeah.
structure left, and the reason
that's good enough for me, man.
Yeah.
If there were piles of cut stone,
But they're also from
trapped in the ice
They're
in
also from like
Antarctica.
1400s. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. The other things are being revealed by the glaciers, which is fascinating as they retreat, like forests. Peat
Right.
bogs, you know, as the glaciers retreat, there's like a whole forest there now. Of course, it's been ground down to the stumps,
right.
but there's humongous freaking stumps underneath there, and you know, and so of course the climate change people are like, shh,
Yeah.
because they don't want to talk about there being forests in the retreating glaciers because the retreating glaciers are supposed to be, you know, catastrophic, and if there were forests there, it's
It
not
must have
catastrophic.
been great.
Yeah, it must have
Go
been badass, and then the glaciers came and destroyed the forest, which is terrible, right? Right, guys?
Right,
Come
guy?
on, right?
Okay, so caves in Antarctica. There
okay,
could be
yes.
caves, and then inside the caves there could be badass shit.
Yes, and
I just want to freaking know. Like, I want somebody to drill through this freaking ice. If any of you scientists are out there listening to me, and you have really good friends in government, maybe you can get a bunch of money and go drill down there and look for caves.
well, look for caves. Like we know that in ancient times, many times people during times of catastrophe dug immense cavern structures and lived in them. So
Right.
it's entirely possible that something like that is left. Now, I just think that any structures they built on the surface are just
Yeah, I can see that.
They're
but,
just gone.
But also, there are lakes under there.
Yes.
So at the bottom of the lake, since
can-
the ice is not, you know,
Right.
that's just water.
right.
It's liquid water.
Yeah, but it's liquid water. But the other problem with that is the pressure. You're under 2 miles of ice.
Right, but a stone structure,
Yes.
that kind of pressure would be okay.
Yeah, it would. But anybody trying to live in it would be a very small person.
Maybe they're ogre. I watched that James Cameron thing where he took the sub down
Yeah.
to the Marianas Trench. I don't remember which video I was watching, trying to find a bunch of them, but they put this model of a human head in this chamber and brought it up to the pressure that it would be down in the bottom of the trench, and they get it out, and it's like tiny.
yeah. Yeah.
It's like the size of the guy's hand. It's like, oh crap, that's what's gonna happen.
But
to
it's
you.
still perfect, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because the pressure was
Equal,
uniform.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember seeing a picture, and this was from a Navy sub, because submarines have double hulls.
right.
So there's an outer hull that's like the shield from torpedoes or running into shit or whatever, and then there's the inner hull, and that's the pressure hull. And between them is an open space. And so when you're coming down through one of the hatches in the top, you pass between those two, right? And
Right.
there's kind of a workspace there where people will, you know, and this guy left a big, 44 ounce whatever styrofoam coffee cup or whatever, and they took it under and they took it way deep or whatever. When they came back up and the coffee cup was like the freaking size of a shot glass, still perfect.
Yeah.
Still in a styrofoam. He's like, wow, it's kind of heavy, weird. It's weird.
And that's an espresso cup now.
Yeah, you could barely read 44 ounce on there. So, what about Hapgood's crust displacement? What do you think of that? You want to explain it? You listen to the book.
Yeah, so crustal displacement is basically the idea that the entire crust acting as sort of one body on the exterior of the mantle which would be molten liquid, basically.
Molten liquid.
Molten liquid. There I go again. What the hell?
What's your problem?
Molten rocks.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad you caught that one. I don't have to do another I'm dumb section. So yeah, the whole crust can shift sort of as one thing. Now, obviously, during that process, there'd probably be earthquakes and volcanoes erupting and shit.
Gigantic tsunamis, yeah.
Right. But the basic idea is like, if one of the ways they describe it is like an orange peel that's completely separate from the orange on the inside.
Yeah.
And if the thing's spinning, but the orange peel on the outside, if there was some disturbance or some, like if you had the whole thing spinning in space and you threw a rock at it and it hits the orange peel in a certain direction, the peel might shift all the way, the whole thing around the outside.
So it could be precipitated by an impact, right?
Right. And this idea,
Precipitated?
precipitated by an impact.
Preceded is what I meant to say. Not precipitated is like rain.
I could be wrong about this, but it seems like they kind of had that idea for a while, scientists. I'm just saying they. And they worked on it, and it's pretty much been discarded at this point.
Yeah.
Now, it does seem like something that is possible, and I don't think anybody's saying it's impossible. I think they're looking at more in terms of probability based on all these other things that they see around the planet.
Well, and the thing that makes me think about it is I'm going to try to say this right, the Mohorovic discontinuity, which is, okay, so when they were looking at they're doing seismic readings and looking towards the interior of the planet, they expected the crust material to slowly sort of transition from solid rock and everything like that to the molten mantle material, right? But it doesn't do that. There is a sharp, sudden change where it's like rock, bam, mantle material, right? And it's basically a film. It's called the Mohorovic discontinuity, and it's the place where the crust suddenly becomes mantle,
right?
And
that kind of makes sense to me, though. I looked into phase changes, of various different substances.
Yeah.
And
it's sudden, yeah.
Right, but you can graph the phase change based on pressure, which is also temperature.
Right.
Well, not exactly. You can increase the pressure on something and then drop the temperature too. But as you increase, when you're thinking of changing pressure,
the pressure increase or the temperature increases as pressure does. Yeah.
Right. So you can. There are these points where I can't remember what they're called, but basically there's a point on the graph that is the point at which, say, let's take water for example, boils. Right.
Yeah.
It changes from a liquid to a gas. And so, for example, that would be 212 degrees Fahrenheit at 1 atmosphere, which is like 14 psi.
Okay, yeah.
At sea level.
Yeah.
Right, of course, because as you said. Anyway, so if you increase the pressure, then the temperature required for boiling the water increases, right?
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, if you have on the same graph the freezing point of the water, that thing will move too as you increase pressure. But they don't move the same. So there's not always 180 degrees between the boiling temperature of water and the freezing temperature of it.
Okay.
As you increase or decrease pressure. So you can get to points where those 2 points are so close together that it will skip an entire phase and just go from a solid to a gas.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So, just having looked at those types of things in different substances, every different substance has a different set, and some substances have their say solid phase change temperature pressure is way far away from their solid to gas phase change.
Okay, yeah.
Some substances they're very close, they're much closer together. So I can imagine that when you have these incredible temperatures and pressures in under the crust of the earth, and you're talking about rock,
which is many
different things that there. It just seems plausible to me that there would be that type of discontinuity, like that it wouldn't just slowly merge into something. And again, I don't know if we talked about this, but nucleation would be required for this magma to sort of solidify.
Yeah, because it's under all this pressure and heat, it would require nucleation instead of
Right.
because it's not going to cool down.
So you can imagine that there's solid rock here, and it's extremely hot, wanting to melt, but it can't.
because of the pressure. Yeah,
Right. And then underneath it, there's commotion and whatever going on, and there's probably particles nucleating to that solid thing, and then it's also liquefying at the same time,
Right.
just right in that area, very rapidly.
Yeah, but yeah, that all makes sense. I'd never thought of that. But the point of the reason I was bringing up this discontinuity is because that's what makes it make sense to me that the crust as a whole thing could slip over the mantle, because
Yes.
it doesn't slowly change into mantle material, which would make it kind of weird and spongy. It would
There
be locked together.
High viscosity.
Yeah, it would be you would have these huge, massive like spires of rock sticking
Right.
down. It doesn't do that. It's just very smooth and orderly, and so that whole thing could slide over the other if
Yeah.
it was. And Hapgood described it as the ice cap on Antarctica. We've got right now the Ross Ice Shelf, right? Were you going to talk about that?
No.
Okay, so the Ross Ice Shelf sticks.
I was going to talk about ice skating.
Oh, but it's fun.
Like, yeah, you put solid piece of steel on top of ice.
Oh, yeah.
And you put pressure on it, and it just for a moment melts that ice and makes the surface extremely slippery.
Right. That's right. Yeah, it lowers the friction.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
So you have the crust sitting on this liquid, and there's where that discontinuity is. You can imagine it being because all the reactions happening
Oh.
there. It's like very slippery.
Oh yeah. So if a big impact happens, it sends humongous pressure waves down into the crust as it impacts the material of the mantle. That material may briefly turn into a gas right there at the discontinuity and allow it to slip across. Yeah, that's really cool.
That'd be interesting.
So Hapgood's idea, and he actually sent this to Einstein. Hapgood's idea was that the Ross Ice Shelf, which if you look at Antarctica, the Ross Ice Shelf is this huge tongue of ice sticking way off.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's lopsided. Like in other words, Antarctica has got this huge lopsided thing of
Right.
ice, and he was saying that if something like that continued to grow, then it's possible. And remember that unlike the Arctic, the Antarctic ice is locked because it's got mountains and
Right.
it's got land under it, right?
Right.
It's holding it there on the crust.
landlocked.
Right. So the Earth is spinning, and then you've got this huge tongue of ice that's sticking off, and if that continues to grow, there's a ton of
Centrifugal force.
yeah, it's displaced.
trying to pull it towards the
trying to
pole,
pull it
or
like
to
stick
the
a piece of bubble gum to a soccer
equator.
ball and then spin it.
Yeah.
That bubble gum is going to go to the equator really fast, right? Because the soccer ball's like where the gum is stuck. So he was saying that something like that growing off the pole just to one side could eventually, because of the spin of the Earth, pull the entire crust.
Right. So here's my problem with it. And we're gonna
I don't
have
like
to take
it.
a break. Here's my problem with it. Based on a lot of evidence produced by people like Robert Schoch and
Yeah.
Graham Hancock, all those
Carlson.
guys.
Yeah.
We were talking about the pyramid and its alignment,
Yes.
and it is in this terrestrial alignment with the other pyramids and the Sphinx.
Yeah.
Right now they're looking at the Sphinx. There's geological evidence that the Sphinx, the body of the Sphinx, that enclosure that
Right,
they
it's
dug
very,
out
very
of the
ancient,
stone
yeah.
is very, very old. So how can the pyramid, if the pyramid, the Great Pyramid and the other two pyramids and the Sphinx are, let's say, built roughly around the same time period, how can that alignment be so perfect if there had been crustal displacement around the same time? Now, it would have to have been after the crustal displacement. In other
Yeah.
words, like there hasn't, since the pyramid has been built,
There hasn't
so
been any-
perfectly aligned, and the Sphinx being pointing due east.
Yeah. I would say that it was built by the survivors of that crustal displacement who lived in Antarctica.
Yeah. So you could say that.
Yeah,
And
that would be the idea to me, and that's why people think that Atlantis, or maybe it might even be Lemuria, which is the sort of the Pacific version of the Atlantis, Mu. Very, very, very old ideas. But yeah, so
And the
30 or
idea
40,000 years ago.
The idea wasn't that the crust was like completely in its different spot, but that really Antarctica was sort of rotating. Part of Antarctica was still on the pole.
Yeah.
And the part that is like Queen Maud Land and all that area was
like Canada.
further- Right.
Like parts of that stick all the way up to the pole, into the Arctic Circle at least, right?
Right.
And so like if Antarctica was like that, and then something happened, there was some massive crustal displacement, and it actually rotated onto the pole, and then it began to glaciate almost
Right.
immediately. They would have had to, even if they survived the crustal displacement bullshit, which would have been horrendous, they would have had to flee there. And
Right, and so you have all these cultures coming up South America
Yeah.
along the coastline there.
That's right. The Olmecs are like show up. You know, I mean, they don't give it very early dates, but you can tell by the type of stone structures they were building and the huge, massive
Right.
basalt monuments.
There's no trial and error. It's
Yeah.
just like everything is awesome all at once.
That's
And
right.
the same thing happens in Egypt.
And then it
all these
degrades.
places.
It's like
Right.
starts out badass and just gets worse after
Right.
that.
In the case of the Olmecs, they just vanish.
Yeah, they just disappear entirely.
They
yeah.
they just showed up. Everything was awesome, and then they vanished before it sucked.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And the next culture doesn't show up for thousands and thousands of years. Yeah.
Right.
And we've gone thousands and thousands of years over, so we need to take a break.
Yeah. All the while, throughout all of that, there were snakes.
Hopefully we didn't start out awesome and get worse and worse.
Snakes in the ice.
Snakes. Ice snakes. Ice skates?
Snake snacks.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents and skirptards. This is Brothers of the Serpent coming to you from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science.
Brothers of the Serpent.
That's right. Among the stone bones, high atop the Edwards Plateau. Stone bones.
Brothers of the Serpents.
Brothers of the Serpents. Snake bites.
This episode was brought to you by Snake Bites.
So I kind of want to try to shift the subject here to something we've never discussed yet.
Can you believe it, folks? We're actually talking about taking a tangent before we take a tangent.
This is not a tangent, it's another subject.
No.
We've discussed, and we haven't discussed this in a while, but the topic of esoterica. Yes. Meanings hidden behind other meanings. Yes. And the fact, and the idea that many ancient stories have this built into them. Right?
Secrets.
Secrets amongst the words. So, one particular topic that is definitely in the realm of esoterica, and many people who end up looking into strange things like we have been doing start with this. You know, if they don't start with aliens and UFOs, then they definitely will start with this. There's a lot of people that spend their entire lives on this, and it's been happening for a long time, and that is the subject of the Holy Grail. Yeah. So I'm going to start this, and I've got all these notes because I don't want to get any of this wrong, and there's a lot of detail here. But this topic is a definite massive wormhole of a rabbit hole. Okay, so I've been studying this intently for the past week since the last show, and putting all these notes together. So like, forgive me if I kind of stutter through stuff because my notes are like not in order. But
Well, I'll just let you all know that that's not how I began my journey.
yeah.
This will be the first time.
Yeah, I don't think we've never actually discussed the Grail particularly, right?
I watched the Indiana Jones thing and I was like, yeah, this is the wooden one.
Yeah,
know?
yeah, that's
Jesus
right.
was Carpenter.
He chose poorly.
So he had a lathe because that cup was made by a lathe.
Well, and we've also seen, of course, Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail.
Right. He's already got one, you see.
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to start out by reading one of the original Grail stories. Okay, now this is a translation or whatever, but it has to do with a young man named Percival. Okay, so it says, one day while out hunting with his javelins, he encountered 5 knights and is so taken with them that he resolves against his mother's wishes to follow them to King Arthur's court and there seek admission to train as a knight. This he does and eventually proves himself by defeating the Red Knight who had stolen a chalice from King Arthur and shamed the queen at the same time. After a period of training at Arthur's court, Percival rides out in search of adventure. He apprentices under an elderly, skilled knight named Gonemons, who admonishes him to be temperate in all things, including in his speech and discourse. Upon leaving the old knight, Percival encounters two fishermen in a boat and is directed to a nearby castle where he may obtain succor and lodging. It is in this castle that the vision of the Grail unfolds before his awestruck eyes. When he first arrives, he is led to a vast hall, whereupon a squire presents him with a sword, and he is told that it is given, quote, to whom it was adjudged and destined, unquote. Upon the sword, it is written that it will never break except in sore peril. In the hall, seated upon a couch, is an old man. As Percival reclines, another squire enters the hall bearing a white lance from which blood drips. Two more squires enter, carrying two branched candlesticks. They are followed by a beautiful damsel bearing the Graal, which shines with such brilliant light it overwhelms the light of the candles, quote, as the sun does that of the stars, unquote, and is so dazzling that Percival cannot even look directly at it. Finally, there follows another damsel bearing a beautiful, richly jeweled silver platter. During this procession of the Grail, Percival is wonderstruck and desirous of understanding what it all means, but remembering the admonition of Gonemons, he does not speak nor ask any question regarding the resplendent vision. In the morning, Percival awakens to find the castle utterly deserted. As he departs across the open drawbridge, it suddenly closes, almost crushing him and his horse. Once outside the castle, he has an encounter with a mysterious damsel in the forest. She tells him that the old man on the couch, the host, was actually the fisherman who had first directed him to the castle and that he was a king. Okay, so this is the origin of the king in the Grail is often referred to as the Fisher King. Okay, he's the bearer of royal blood. She tells Percival that the king had been wounded through the thighs by the lance and the wounds had not healed. She asks him if he witnessed the procession, the sword, the bleeding lance, the Graal, the silver platter, and if he asked concerning the meaning of what he saw. When she finds out that Percival had remained silent, she drops a bombshell on him. She informs him that had he opened his mouth and asked after the meaning of the Grail procession, that the fisherman who was a king would have been healed of his injuries, if he had asked. After further wanderings, Percival encounters another damsel, only this time she is hideously repulsive. She curses him for not asking after the meaning of the lance and the Grail, and tells him that because of his silence, the king still suffers. Strife and conflict prevails, and the very land itself is degenerating. Percival vows to find the Grail and redeem himself, to which end he subsequently wanders for 5 years. As he does so, the curse settles over the land, transforming it into a wasteland, and only if Percival is successful in his quest to recover the lost Grail will the curse be lifted, the king healed, the land restored, and peace and harmony prevail. Okay, so that is one of the oldest...
Man, that is loaded.
Yeah, it's very loaded.
I was trying to figure it all out.
Parse it.
No.
So
the one thing I got from that is that seems at first kind of obvious, but maybe then, I already question it, but because he didn't ask, there's this thing with the esoteric where it's like you have to seek it.
Right, exactly.
Right? You have to be inquisitive.
That's great. That's definitely a clue. Like one must seek, right? He learns that later, and then he's seeking afterwards. But it's like too late. Now another thing I want to point out is the connection between land and king. The king is weakened by this wound from the lance. Okay, and the wound won't heal. But it also says that the land begins to degrade and it becomes a wasteland as the king gets sicker and sicker. Okay, so there's that. This is one thing. And in all these Grail stories, there's this hint of the connection between king and land. And you remember the Albion series we read, where like the king gets sicker and and the land just turns into this wasteland. Right. Okay. So to restore the king is to restore the land. Yeah. So keep that in mind. So let's see. Now, the interesting thing is, remember the symbols. You have the sword, right? Then the lance with the blood on the tip, okay? And then the two candlesticks. Right. And then the Grail itself, which is... the silver platter with jewel. That's the last one. Oh, okay. The Grail itself, which is too bright to look at. It's so bright that he has to avert his eyes, right? And now there's all these other... You can go through the Bible and everything. You can find this, like, that the face of the Lord is so bright that you can't look directly at it. It shines brighter than the sun, okay? And then, of course, the platter. This jeweled platter or whatever. So and there's those 5 symbols: the sword, the lance, right? The candlesticks, and then the Grail, the platter, right? So there's these 5 symbols of the Grail, and there is I've got them in the notes here, but I'm not going to quote them all. But basically, there's a bunch of different Grail scholars that have gone through, and this goes all the way back to the most early, the earliest discussions of the Grail, which, by the way, starts out in France. So it starts out in France, and then it the Grail legend gets translated all over the place. It goes to all over Europe, and it somehow is connected to alchemy. Now, also notice the strange sort of correlation with the tarot cards.
Right.
Okay.
The
Like,
cup.
what are the
the
cup,
the cup, the wand.
Yeah.
Which is basically a staff.
yeah.
Dang it.
There's cup wand. Isn't there one that's like
Pentacles.
isn't there spears or something like that, or is that wands?
No, those are wands.
Okay,
They're like staffs. The cup,
lance.
the wand, the pentacle, and I'll think of it later.
Okay.
Don't put me on.
But yeah, so there's this interesting correlation with the tarot. Okay. And so that kind of connects it to sort of magic, mysticism, alchemy. Okay. Now, let's see. I've got
Swords.
Yeah, swords. That's what right. Swords, wands, cups, and the pentacle.
Which is basically the
platter.
the star with a circle around it.
Right, the star. So that's another thing. So let's see. And just going back to Esoterica real quick, because I've got some interesting sort of side notes on this. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and quote this. Students of the mysteries, occultists, and hermetic philosophers understand that the archaic wisdom is preserved and transmitted in one form as a special language, an argot or slang which only initiates can understand. This language has been called by many names: the language of the birds, the language of diplomats, the language of the gods, or of the angels. Lingua verte, or the green language, and the Adamic language. It is reputed to be the language spoken before the fall of the Tower of Babel and the confusion of tongues. Okay, it could be either spoken or written. It was based upon the use of puns, homophones, etymological derivations, the use of numbers and symbols to provide alternate meanings to words, phrases, and names, other than the superficially apparent ones. These alternate meanings could then be substituted, yielding hidden teachings.
Yes.
So this kind of correlates to also the 4 levels, right? There's the 4 different levels of
Right.
speech. And you had spoken of your study of etymology.
Right.
Okay, so all of this Grail stuff is etymological. And as I was diving into this, I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. Okay, so
Hell yeah. I'm excited.
It's just amazing. So the
I
first
got snake bumps.
Yeah, snake bumps.
They're like, my scales are
Why are you holding
goosey.
back those snake backs?
Why are you holding the snake backs from me, bro?
Okay, so let's see. So let's start with the word Grail itself. Okay. There's a word Gar, which means stone. So you could say so Gar El.
Oh yeah.
What is that?
L is like
God,
God or angel.
heaven. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the
Right. Elohim.
one of the shining ones.
Yes. Yeah. Elohim. Like so biblically, in the Hebrew or whatever, El was always so Daniel meant like favored of God, something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So so names and everything, you have the El
Of God.
Yes, of God is what it means. John of God.
Yeah.
So Grail could be stone of God, stone of heaven.
Right. Stone of heaven.
Okay.
Meteor.
Now that's yes. So a meteor, right? So that's or a comet. Okay, and so
Too bright to look at.
Yeah, too bright to look at.
Brighter than the sun.
Yeah. So other ideas. So this is from another excerpt from one of the Grail legends. A valiant host lives there. Now they're talking about Camelot, but of course it wasn't called that in this. I can't even pronounce the name, so I didn't put it in here. But a valiant host lives there, and I will tell you how they are sustained. They live from a stone of the purest essence. It is called lapis exilis. By the power of this stone, the phoenix is burned to ashes, but from the ashes she is reborn. So lapis, and I'm probably butchering this, it's Latin. Lapis exilis, okay, means the same thing, stone of heaven.
What is lapis lazuli or whatever?
Lapis lazuli is like the blue stone. It's let's see, I've got this in here. Okay.
That's the only place.
Yeah, lapis lazuli or something like that. It's a blue gem.
Okay.
Okay.
I've heard that name.
Yeah.
In like a lot of these ancient texts.
Yeah. So going again with the etymology, lapis exilis. So people have thought that lapis exilis might be a corruption of lapis ex calis, which means stone from the heavens, or of lapis lapsus ex calis, a stone fallen from the heaven, or finally of lapis elixir, which is the fabulous philosopher's stone of alchemy. And we've talked about this in context with Newton, right? The philosopher's stone.
Right.
But the Grail legend puts another layer of meaning onto it, that the stone itself is the stone from heaven. Okay? So now why is there this concept of the... What is the deal with the symbols of the king and the lance and the sword and the...
Well, I think with the king, it's in the ancient text. It talks about how the gods brought kingship down
Yes.
to man and gave it to man. And I've always wondered about that kingship.
Kingship.
Like there's these words with ship after them.
Yeah.
That's right. Fellowship.
That's right.
Kingship.
Space ship.
Friendship.
Yeah, so in many of the earlier manuscripts, the Grail is called the Sangreal, okay? And even in the earlier version by Mallory, it is called the Sangreal. Okay,
That sounds like Shangri-La.
yeah, Shangri-La.
Shangri-La.
Right. Sangreal, or Sangreal. Now this one's interesting to me because, and this adds an entire other, like when you're looking through this, you're like, okay, wait, what? Now I'm getting confused. There's two ways to take this because Sangreal is not a word, or I mean, other than applying to the Grail, it's not really, it isn't a word, but you could take it as Sangreal or Sangreal, right? That means holy cup or holy chalice, okay? Mm-hmm. But if you separate it in a different place, Sangreal, it means royal blood. Now,
In what language?
it's let's see.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I don't have it in my notes. Sorry. It probably is Celtic, because that's what they're talking about here. So in Sangreal or Sangreal is holy cup and royal blood. So then, of course, there's a question when you're reading through all these scholars and everything. They're like, well, which one is it? What's the right one, right? And Randall Carlson, who is like where I got most of this information, because he has this just fantastic set of 12 humongous articles on this, which I've been studying all week. He suggested it's both.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The cup is the vessel.
Right.
It holds the blood. So, like
Right.
in the tradition
With Jesus.
of communion,
Yes.
the cup holds the blood, which is the
The blood of Christ.
Yeah.
The royal blood.
Right.
The blood of God. The blood from heaven, right? So you have this, and okay, so going back to the Grail legend that a lot of people are familiar with, because I read this thing about Percival, which has almost no Christian symbols in it whatsoever, but there is the Grail legend of the cup of Christ, which, what happens in that? You have all the same symbols. You have the cup, you have the spear, the lance, which pierces his side.
Right.
Blood and water flows, which Joseph of Arimathea catches in the chalice, right? And then, of course, the legend continues that he then travels with this cup to Britain, to the arid rye, to the or not arid rye, but the Albion, to the King's Land, and he establishes, I think it's the chapel at Glastonbury, which is now in ruins. Okay,
Yeah.
and it was built to house the Grail, the chalice. Okay. So that's a legend that more people are familiar with, and of course, if you watch the Indiana Jones movie or the Monty Python one, that's the one they're referencing, is that it's the cup of Christ, you know. Mm-hmm. But there's still this connection with blood. So what's the deal with the blood? Now, and you mentioned meteor comet earlier. Now, what's fascinating is when you start to look at historical. Okay, so the other thing, I'm hopefully I'm not making a total mismatch of this, but the other thing the Grail is talking about is something from heaven.
right.
So how do you reconcile the idea of blood and then something from heaven? Well, do you remember in 2012 when it freaking rained red rain in India? Do you remember this?
yeah.
Okay, I think I've got it referenced in here, but basically it rained this blood red rain in India, and it was freaking everybody out, of course, because it's like, oh my god, it's the end of the world, it's 2012, oh my god, right? Okay, but let's see if I've got it in here. So November 14th and 15th of 2012, a red rain was seen to fall over several provinces of Sri Lanka. I'm sorry, it's Sri Lanka. Initial analysis of this rain seemed to indicate that the red color was caused by unicellular microorganisms presumed to be terrestrial in nature. Subsequent analysis, however, disclosed the presence of high concentrations of uranium in the outer layer of the cells, which makes them decidedly not anything we know terrestrial. Like uranium is massively radioactive.
Right.
And furthermore, all these. So think about that first. The rain was red, and it had single-celled things in it, which looks exactly like blood, basically. But the organisms also had an extra coating around the outside of them that made them highly resistant to all kinds of radiation. So, and the other interesting fact about this whole deal is the previous day, several massive sonic, what they called sonic booms were heard over the area. So the idea, and one of the physicists that was studying this later came out and said this. He was like, these could be extraterrestrial, released into the atmosphere by an explosion of some kind of chondrite, the bolide, which is basically a meteor or comet thing that enters the atmosphere. It explodes and releases all these cells or whatever, and then they stay up there until the next day it starts to rain, and they fall with the rain, and it makes it into red, this red color. So you have blood and water falling.
Yeah, from the cup.
Well, yeah, you have blood and water falling from the heaven.
Right.
Okay.
But I'm just like connected to like the
so all these
spear.
symbols.
The spear can also be like the impact.
Yeah.
The thing coming from the heavens that impacts the earth.
Right. Exactly.
Or and the vessel that holds the blood is the cup.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go through my notes here and just kind of give you some little clips about different. And people have gone through and dug through all this historical stuff looking for these signs and symbols in the sky. Okay, so the death of Arthur is placed by various historical writings in the period from 537 to 542 AD. Okay, in the 11th year of Justinian, which is the year 850 of the Greeks, or 538-539 AD, in the month of December, a great and terrible comet appeared at the sky at evening time for 100 days. Okay, in the, Geophysical Memoirs, number 70 for 1937, CE Britain publishes a compilation of various meteorological and astronomical events in the British Isles entitled A Meteorological Chronology to AD 1450. For the year 541 AD, we find this remarkable entry. In the year of grace of AD 541, there appeared a comet in Gaul, so vast that the whole sky seemed to be on fire. The same year, there dropped red blood from the clouds, and a dreadful mortality ensued. Okay.
Wow.
Let's see. I have a bunch of these. The first attempts to analyze the chemistry or red rain occurred in the late 19th century when it fell over Calabria, Italy. Laboratory analysis led investigators to conclude that it was, in fact, blood. This led one professor to propose that it must have been the result of a flock of birds becoming caught up somehow in a violent wind.
Yeah. Brilliant. Where were the feathers?
Right.
Show me the feathers.
Show me the feathers. Josephus, writing about events in the year 69 AD, foretelling the imminent fall of Jerusalem, quote, amongst the other warnings, a comet, one of the kind called Ziphius, because their tails appear to represent the blade of a sword, was seen above the city for a space of a whole year. Okay? Or this brief account taken from the 1729 history of Japan refers to events in the reign of Saiyin, which began in 29 BC. In the 36th year of his reign, it rained stars from heaven in Japan. In the 40th year of his reign, on a clear and serene day, there arose all of a sudden, in China, a violent storm of thunder and lightning. Okay, so now we get into the Chinese accounts of it being a dragon. They always refer to this serpent.
Right.
Okay, so you have comets, fiery dragons, and uncommon meteors appeared in the airs, and it rained fire from heaven. Or this account from a European chronicle set down in the year 1000 AD. The heavens having opened, a kind of burning torch fell upon the earth, leaving behind it a long train of light similar to a flash of lightning. Such was its light that it frightened not only those who were in the open country, but those who were within doors. At this opening in the heavens slowly closed, men saw with horror the figure of a dragon, whose feet were blue, whose head seemed to continually increase. Still another account was recorded in the 4th century AD about an event that occurred in 106 BC in the regions of Persia and Rome, when an uproar in the sky was heard and javelins seemed to fall from heaven. There was a rain of blood. At Rome, in daylight, a torch was seen flying high. Yeah. Okay, so you have all these symbols, but these are actual meteorological reports. These people are saying they're seeing javelins and swords in the sky, dragons and shit, and then and then there's blood falling from the sky and water. So how does this connect to like we're beginning to see how maybe some things may be connected to the Grail mystery. You have this cup, right? And then there's the idea of something, a stone from heaven, right? There's a sword, there's a spear, there's blood, royal blood being associated with the kings, which were brought by the gods or appointed by the gods. So you have blood and water. It's fascinating how this connects to the Jesus story,
Right. But also
the spear piercing his side, blood and water. Yeah.
But also, again, okay, and he was what? He was the king.
Yes, he was the king
of kings.
That's right.
So
and the son of God.
In the Arthur story, we had talked about this in a previous episode where basically whoever can draw the sword from the stone will become king, right?
right.
So Arthur becomes king from drawing the sword from the stone,
That's
the
right.
stone being a stone fallen from
that's
heaven.
right.
So
Wow.
bringing kingship down from heaven again in the same respect.
Oh yeah. So the kingship was brought down from heaven by the stone, which he drew the sword from. Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting to think of this idea, these, fairly primitive people thinking, whoever finds the stone from heaven will be king.
Yeah.
Right? But I can't stick with that because
No, let's make it more complicated. Whoever draws a sword from the stone
Yeah,
from
yeah.
heaven.
But I tend to look at it like, why did they go? I always ask myself this question: why did these people in these ancient times who wrote these things down go to such lengths to preserve those writings?
Yeah.
We've asked this question before. Was it because they were fiction?
Right.
Was it because they were myths? Or is it because we needed it?
Yeah.
Humanity needed this knowledge, whatever it was. We needed to know it, and they know that languages will change, and they know that
Yeah.
all of this.
So they put these symbols in there. Yeah.
They put these symbols that will capture anyone's imagination, and again, all of these texts that have so many of these similarities from all over the world were preserved when conquerors came in and were burning libraries. People would have died, could have been murdered for taking these books from the libraries and going, but they did it anyway, and they went and hid them in caves and then were murdered later and whatever.
Yeah.
Like, they went to great lengths to preserve these things for the future. And so, I can't stick with the idea. Now, maybe at King Arthur's time, there was this, because the culture of these symbols was so far removed from themselves, it was more ancient than themselves, and they had already forgotten the meaning.
Right.
And so it was like, I'll make him king, he found the stone. but I feel like the origin of it, why would this idea of this grail, this cup, be of such great importance, right?
Yeah.
And and everything associated with it, like that we must, like with communion, for example, that we will partake of the blood in the cup.
Yeah.
And it's my body.
Right, but it's also somehow it's revitalizing. It's a spiritual communion with God, with the heavens, with with Jesus, and it is supposed to sustain your soul. It's supposed to be revitalizing. So this is. But
it's the idea of immortality again. Like,
yes,
is the immortality? We know the immortality is not physical. Well, we don't know that, but
we don't know.
Assuming that the immortality is not physical, but that the immortality is the story itself. The story is meant to be immortal. And so you must partake of the story, and you must give the story and share the story with the others, and so everyone must come together on this thing.
Yeah.
Communion, to share it, so that so that it remains all the time, forever. So there's something hidden. There's a hidden truth in there that is perhaps telling us something that is to come, and of course it is. In all of the stories, it's the second coming.
I shall return.
Yeah. So I think of it like that. Like, why else would they preserve not just that story, but all of the stories like that?
Yeah.
Because it must be very important to our future. And of course, anybody that practices those traditions will be like, yeah, duh. That's why we do it, right? I'm not sure we've figured it out yet.
Right. Well, there's some ideas, and we shall tell you those ideas when we return.
Welcome back, folks, to the 10 by 10 by 10 Tangent Cube of Science with two bros of snakes. Where we are discussing the Grail and esoteric knowledge, esoteric symbols, ancient stories passed down from badasses.
And yet, no man may speak nor tell of it. Whomever does so is in trouble, for it is the sign of the Grail. Actually, I had that in my notes. That's one of the things about the Grail is that all of these ancient, not ancient, but all of these people who have discussed it or whatever, they all say that you can't talk about it. And here I am talking about it on a podcast.
Yeah, screw that.
Right, because the book is open.
Yeah, this is so. Without the scientific method, we would never figure anything out. And the scientific method requires that you do things in such a way that you record them.
Yep.
You record your ideas and your thoughts for other people to consider. And when everybody does that, then we make progress.
That's right. There's another interesting thing I've got in here. This little quote about where these ideas originated from, and it says, "A heathen, Flagitanus, had achieved high renown for his learning. This scholar of nature was descended from Solomon and born of a family which had long been Israelite until baptism became our shield against the fires of hell. He wrote the Adventure of the Grail. The heathen Flagitanus could tell us how all the stars set and rise again. To the circling course of the stars, man's affairs and destiny are linked. Flagitanus, the heathen, saw with his own eyes in the constellation things he was shy to talk about, hidden mysteries. He said that there was a thing called the Grail, whose name he had read clearly in the constellations, and a host of angels had left it on Earth." Wow. So we were discussing the blood rain and the idea of comets appearing as swords or lances in the sky. And just
The spear of heaven.
That's right, a spear of heaven.
From Gilgamesh.
Yeah. So some people might say, well, how can this be one of the ancient, these ancient esoteric things when this is basically a Christian kind of a sort of a European or even specifically English mystery with King Arthur and the Grail. So I have a few things here that kind of helps with that from around the world. Let's see. Gotta find them because my notes are totally not in order. Okay, first of all, I'll start with one from the Bible itself about this. Okay, the seven angels. This is Revelations, which had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound, and the first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. Okay, so even in Revelations, it's talking about, and this is supposedly a prophecy of the future, right? This is from India, the Mahabharata. Right, one of the Vedic texts. The air was filled with the shouting of men, the roaring of elephants, the blasts of trumpets, and the beating of drums. The rattling of chariots was like to thunder rolling in heaven. The gods and Gandharvas assembled in the clouds and saw the hosts which had gathered for mutual slaughter. As both armies waited for sunrise, a tempest arose, and the dawn was darkened by dust clouds, so that men could scarce behold one another. Evil were the omens. Blood dropped like rain from heaven, while jackals howled impatiently, and kites and vultures screamed hungrily for human flesh. Okay, now, the Iliad from Greece. Zeus foresees that his mortal but beloved son is going to die in the Trojan War, and as a tribute, Zeus poured bloody drops earthwards, honoring his own son. Okay, and there's a later part in there that says, the son of Cronos sent evil turmoil among them, and from aloft cast down dews dripping blood from the sky. Chinese mythology, wherein we find a tale regarding these three tribes perpetrating a great disorder. As a result of their perpetual strife, heaven decreed their destruction. The sun came out at night, and for 3 days it rained blood. A dragon appeared in the ancestral temple, and dogs howled in the marketplace.
Yeah, the sun came out at night.
Right. Yeah. 7 manuscripts of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. This year there was a bloody rain in Britain, and milk and butter were turned to blood. Okay. Irish, the Book of Leinster is found an interesting reference for the year 868 AD. Showers of blood were poured, and the clots of gore were found. Now this is interesting because this talks about the Vikings, and you've had some interest in the Vikings, right? And you talked about how they're like badass warriors. They just fucking kick everyone's asses. Yeah. In the year 1014, a battle took place in Ireland between several warring factions vying for supremacy of the kingdom. The ruler of most of Ireland at the time was Brian Boru, who set out to unify the entire island. The principal resistance came from the Danes of Leinster. In the 156th chapter of the Icelandic Brynnu Nostalgia is found an account of the battle between these foes. One faction had allied itself with the Viking mercenaries, whose exploits were recounted in the Brynnu saga. Just before the battle was to commence, the Vikings heard a great noise so that they all awoke and started up and got into their clothes. Then it rained boiling hot blood upon them. They sheltered themselves with their shields, but many were burned, and that marvel lasted till the broad day. This event was taken as a portent of slaughter by the Vikings and probably contributed to their demoralization and defeat at the hands of the forces of Brian. In fact, every Viking leader was killed in the course of battle. So because they're badass, but whatever, but the blood rained out of the sky and it freaked them out.
Yeah.
And they couldn't really fight. Yeah. Let's see. The Roman history. Reign of Augustus. The 2nd century Roman historian Cassius Dio in book 51. XVII, what is that? 17? He writes regarding events in Egypt. Not only did rain fall in places where no drop had ever been seen before, but blood besides, and the flash of weapons appeared in the clouds, as the showers of blood mingled with water poured down. In other places, the clash of drums and cymbals and the notes of flutes and trumpets were heard, and a serpent of enormous size suddenly appeared and uttered a hiss of incredible volume. Meanwhile, comets were observed in the heavens.
Wow.
So, what's the deal with all this blood?
Okay, so I just remember. And I'm not going to look this up, but when I was researching the story of the Tower of Babel, there are all these different stories from all over, and one of them, this was prior to the building of the Tower of Babel. The angels were seen flying in the heavens, right, from time to time, and they were that was the kingdom of heaven that was forbidden from man. And I don't remember who it was, but this one guy, like, supposedly threw a spear at one of the angels, and it pierced the angel, and it rained blood. And so they knew that they could be killed. And so they began to build the tower. Now, you combine that with the idea that they built the tower to make a name for themselves so that they would not be scattered. And you think about a catastrophe, and they maybe developed some way to stop it.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. That's really cool.
I'll have to find that story some other time.
Okay, so let's see. Well, I've got this one part that I need to talk about. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so this is from another one of the scholars, the Grail scholars or whatever, and he says, in practice, we cannot separate the word Grail from the word cauldron. In early Celtic times, it was in the cauldron of Lugh, or Lewis, old Lugh, that universal medicines were cooked over a special fire. Okay, so let's see. What do I have here?
Toil and trouble.
Okay, so Lugh, toil. So Lugh was the name of an Irish deity. Okay, he was a hero god he is described in a number of epithets that translate from the Gaelic with such meanings as long arm or fierce striker and the bright one with the strong hand. The appellation long arm reveals to Lugh's wielding of his principal weapons, a mighty spear and a sling. It is said in the tales that with this spear, Lugh could vanquish his enemies. The Grail scholar Roger Sherman Loomis associates Lugh's spear specifically with the blood-dripping lance that appeared in the procession of the castle of the Fisher King. He asks, what better explanation is there for this functionless lance in the Fisher King's castle? And then he later remarks, this informs us that it will destroy the whole realm of Logres, which is the name of King Arthur's realm, hence England. A prophecy which accords with the origin of the lance and the spear of Lugh, noted for its destructiveness. Okay, so now you have this spear and it's destroying stuff.
Right.
Okay. And I've got a whole bunch of quotes here that are modern. They're more modern anyway, from people who have actually witnessed, like the Chelyabinsk thing over Russia, where it came down and exploded. And then I've got some from people that witnessed the one over the taiga in Siberia, the Tunguska explosion. Okay, so I'm not going to read them all, but there's some interesting correlations here. Suddenly before me, I saw the sky in the north open to the ground and fire pour out. We were terrified. The fire was brighter than the sun. Right? Or when I turned quickly in the direction of the crash, I saw that the sun's rays were crossed by a broad, fiery white band, or sword. On the left side, towards the north, an irregularly shaped, brilliant, white, somewhat elongated mass was flying into the taiga, with a diameter far greater than the moon's. Okay, so that's Tunguska. On 17th of June, in the northwest of Kursk, an extraordinary phenomenon was observed. At 7:15 a.m. in the northwest, a pillar of fire appeared in the shape of a spear. Right? So now this is Chelyabinsk, which happened in 2013. All the residents saw blinding flashes, very bright ones, and suddenly it was very terribly bright. We could not look at it. I was driving to work, and it was quite dark, but suddenly it became bright as if it were day. It got bigger and bigger, it became brighter and brighter until it became blindingly white, and I had to turn away to save my eyes. Okay, so we have all these similar, and these are modern people. Like, this is a dude in Russia. I probably have seen this guy's video. He's the one playing the techno.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, turn away. Avert my eyes, oh Lord.
We're gonna party in Ukraine!
It is your birthday. Yeah,
This
so
blinding light!
right, and then all of a sudden he's like, I'm averting my eyes, oh Lord.
Yeah.
Well, stop it. Now, the other interesting thing, and this goes back to, this is more modern science, the platinum group metals, okay? PGMs, basically. It's just platinum, iridium, there's a bunch of weird names, like rubynthium, let's see, ruinthium, rhodium, palladium, osmium, okay? These are all PGMs, platinum group metals, and they're trace metals on Earth, and they primarily come from impact zones. Like, the two places in the world that are the big mining sites for these are ancient, what are called astroblemes, which means star wound. They're craters that are degraded by various erosion. Mm-hmm. So they don't look like a crater anymore, but it's like this, you can tell that the crater structure is still there. So they mine these platinum group metals out of these astroblemes, star wounds. And this was fascinating when I was finding this out at the end. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so this is from Scientific American. They devised a way of binding atoms of ruinthium to ribose, or one of the backbone components of the helical chains of DNA. Ruinthium atoms act like electrical connectors into and out of the molecule. They have the added virtue of neither disrupting nor distorting its overall shape. Remember, a catalyst causes or accelerates a chemical change without, however, being permanently affected by the reaction. Okay, so although there has been a long history of using such metals to understand DNA, the ruinthium-ribose combination revealed something extraordinary. The researchers examined the electrical properties of the short lengths of double helix DNA in which there was a ruinthium atom at each end of one of the strands. They estimated from earlier studies that a short strand of DNA ought to conduct up to 100 electrons a second. Imagine their astonishment when they measured the rate of flow along the ruinthium-doped double helix. The current was up by a factor of more than 10,000 times, over 1 million electrons a second. It was as if the double helix was behaving like a piece of molecular wire or a superconductor.
Holy shit.
Okay, so
ribonucleic acid.
So again, you get if you go back to the Grail mysteries, there's this idea of the king and he's wounded and the land is turned into a wasteland. Yes. But the discovery of the Grail will what? It replenishes the land.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm thinking about Tunguska in Siberia and what the scientists found when they went there. Now, they didn't go until, the explosion happened in 1908, and they didn't get there until almost 5 decades later. Okay. And I don't have this written down anywhere, but and of course the Tunguska explosion just destroyed. I mean, it laid waste to 800 square miles of taiga forest. It just flattened all these trees and everything. But when they got there, of course, that was ancient history at that point. Not ancient, but it was 50 years old. But they found so many strange things in the life forms there that there were brand new freaking species that no one had ever seen before of different types of bugs and stuff that are they're just not found anywhere, right? And there are some plants that had completely stopped growing, like all their growth had halted, but other ones that had just freaking gone massive. Okay, so something happened. There was an injection of something. This implies that there was an injection of something from that explosion that first it destroys the land, but then there's this replenishment.
Yeah, the phoenix.
Yeah. You have the bird gets destroyed to ashes, and then it's reborn, right? So,
man, that's a cool idea. That's causing mutations, in other words.
Right. And now if you think about this stuff with the platinum group metals, which
Right.
comes from these things, and it connects to our DNA, it just like,
It
clunk,
just
clunk.
like makes it all badass.
Yeah, and stuff starts to happen. Now think about the mass extinction events. We have these things like you have the Permian extinction.
Right. And then right after that, just
Yeah,
like
the
blam!
Cambrian explosion.
Yeah.
Right? In this case, the explosion is explosion of life out of nowhere. All these new forms just bam, they appear. It's just like, holy crap, you know? So first it wipes it out, like the phoenix burns into ashes, but then there's this rebirth.
Yeah.
So still, you still come back to the Grail and you're like, but how does this, I don't see how this connects. It's like, I mean, kind of you're starting to get a picture of the lance, okay? So let's go back to comets, okay? So there's a, let me get my notes here. Let's see. I gotta find this particular section. Here it is, okay. And I'm just gonna read from this first part because this is the only part that I don't know specifically, but the life of a comet falls naturally into 5 stages, okay? Its birth, commiserate with the solar system, goes back some 4.5 billion years. This first stage in its existence involves the aggregation and condensation of a cometary nucleus out of the primordial cosmic material, which are fragments of the protoplanetary disk left over after the construction of the planets and their satellites. Okay, the, quote, stone the builders rejected.
That's cool.
The material of which comets are composed is a remarkable mix of exotic ingredients, including crystalline rock ranging from dust size through the size of boulders up to the size of mountains, various frozen gases such as carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, and ammonia, organic compounds such as methanol, ethanol, and formaldehyde, also hydrocarbons and amino acids. All of these are frozen together in a matrix of ice and finally enclosed within a crust of cemented cosmic dust and rock several meters thick, like the shell of an egg. This is the first stage of cometary life. And it's, okay, so Randall Carlson refers to this first stage as aggregation, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then comets are, in our solar system, comets are either in something called the Kuiper disk, okay, which is, it starts basically from the orbit of Neptune and goes out, and it kind of spreads out like wings as it gets thicker. Mm-hmm. Because closer to the sun, things tend to orbit in the plane of the sun's ecliptic, right? The equator of the sun. So right there around Neptune, it's confined to that. But as it goes out farther and farther, the disk sort of fans out and becomes foggy. And then it connects to what's called the Oort cloud. The Oort cloud is this humongous freaking like bubble around the entire sun, and it goes out as far as 2 light years.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's like, I mean, it's estimated hundreds of trillions of cometary bodies out there. Now, I don't know if that's really true because nobody's seen them, but every once in a while, these comets like ISON, the most recent one, Comet ISON, they just come wheeling in from out there, out of nowhere. And those are the long, so any comet that comes in from the Oort cloud is going to be a long period comet. It is going to come in and it's never going to return after it goes around the sun. It'll go back out and it'll never return, at least not in human. You know, I mean, like in human scale. We've been around for maybe 200,000 years. If one had come in right when we first showed up 200,000 years ago, it still would be on its way back out. It would, you know.
Yeah.
Anything coming in from the Kuiper belt, though, is going to be one of the short ones, like Halley's Comet,
Right.
Hale-Bopp, stuff like that. But what's fascinating, and we've discussed this before, I think, is the fact that various things can dislodge these comets. And one of them is, you know, like, one of them is the passage of the sun across, the passage of the solar system across the plane of the galaxy.
Right.
Which just happened.
Yeah. It's still happening.
Yeah, it's still happening. So the idea there is that there's some kind of gravitational thing happening. So when we pass across this galactic plane, that this disturbs these orbits of these comets because the orbits are really, really delicate.
Yeah.
You know, the gravity is so minute out there or whatever. We pass across this and it can perturb them a little bit. And if they go out farther, they just orbit in a farther plane. But if they come in, they may drop. If it slows them down, basically, they may drop in towards the inner system. And if they get close enough to be caught by Neptune, then that's it. Because all the outer planets, the huge gas giants, for some reason, are so their sizes, which, you know, their mass or whatever, their gravity, I guess I should say, and their distances from each other makes them like a bucket brigade, and they'll just pass the comets back and forth all the way to the inner system.
Yeah.
Sometimes they get swallowed by Jupiter. Actually, a lot of the time they get swallowed by Jupiter, which happened with the Shoemaker-Levy comet. Remember
Yes.
that? Okay, so
I can't do this.
when they're out there orbiting in the Kuiper Belt or in the Oort cloud, this is the next stage of the cometary life, which is called hibernation. Okay, the passage across the galactic plane, or maybe some larger orbiting body out there, Nibiru, Planet X, or whatever, moves past them and throws them into the inner system. That's called activation. This is the next part. And it can take a long time. Like something from the Kuiper Belt, if it's way out there, it can take 50,000 years before it gets into to where the gas giants are. I mean, unless it's really hauling ass.
Yeah.
But based on the speeds that all these other comets come in, it'll take a long time. But once they get in, after activation, then you have disintegration. Okay, and that's because, like we saw with Shoemaker-Levy, as they come into the gravitic influence of the larger planets out there, they begin to break up. And they don't have to be passing really close to them or whatever. Just all the weird gravity in the inner solar system starts to pull them apart because they're kind of fragile.
Yeah.
So, like Shoemaker-Levy spread out into, 24, 26 pieces before it all, and they all went back to Jupiter, boom, 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 one after the other, right?
Yeah.
And then the last stage is amalgamation, which is a mixture with something else. Okay, so the comet comes in, it disintegrates, and then it impacts something. Amalgamation, bam, 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 bam. It mixed with Jupiter, right? So now think back to the first story that I told you with Percival. What was the progression in the castle?
Yeah, I'm not good with that stuff. A sword.
Right, the lance,
Yeah.
the candlesticks, multiple lights in the sky. Okay, then the Grail itself, the thing too bright to look at, and then the platter. Okay. So in
A jeweled platter.
so in aggregation, the very beginning, okay, you have the sword, and then you have the lance, which is like what it would look like in the sky as it's moving through or whatever. Then you have these candlesticks. Two squires come by with multiple, with candlesticks that split into multiple ones. So that's like the multiple lights of the comet is disintegrated.
Yeah.
Then you have the comet itself, the Grail, right? Too bright to look at. And then you have this platter or whatever. And I remember that people have said that it's a cup or chalice, that it's associated with the cauldron in which the cauldron of Lu, in which there were like universal medicines that were mixed in a special fire.
Yeah.
Okay. This is, and then remember we talked about the platinum group metals and all
Right.
that stuff. Okay, so this is what blew my mind. This is, and there's some more etymology for you. The term Grail comes from the Middle English Grail, spelled Grayle, which is taken from the Old French as a modification of Graal, Graal, taken in turn from Middle Latin, a modification of the stem of Gradale, or Gradale, which means plate. And this derives from the Latin modification of the Greek word for bowl. And the Greek word for bowl is crater.
That's badass. Hell yeah.
So, can that really be the origin of the Grail mystery? Like, the crater is the cup that holds the royal blood.
Oh shit, it's a crater. It's not made of wood.
Think of it, the cup, the cauldron of Lu, in which universal medicines are made in a special fire. And then think of what happened in Tunguska after the explosion.
Yeah.
All these crazy animals. Think of the ruthenium or whatever on the end of the DNA that makes it into a superconductor. Right. Dude, the Grail. Yes, the royal blood, the stone from heaven.
That's freaking badass. So that's why you drink the blood from the cup in the Christian tradition.
That's right, because it's. And remember, it's also about it turns the land into a wasteland, but then it replenishes it.
Yeah.
The king is wounded by this lance. Just boom, right? You
Yeah.
got this, and it won't heal. But then there's the replenishment from the medicines built, in the special fire. Holy crap! Is that really what the Grail Legend's about?
Holy crap.
Holy crap, folks!
Yeah, it's freaking awesome.
You shall seek the Grail. Good idea, Lord. Of course, it's a good idea.
So they were looking for a crater.
Right. That's. I mean, think of the. Like I was reading in there about how he said that he had read it in the constellations, seen secret hidden mysteries in the sky.
That's exactly what I was thinking the whole time too. It's like all that stuff has all these astronomical connections.
Yeah.
In so many different ways, but that's a brilliant one. That's badass.
All right, I'm done.
No, you're not. Answer questions. Go.
First question.
Yeah, that's freaking awesome. I don't have to think about that. It definitely connects with the whole drawing the sword from the stone thing, though. I want to go back to that because you had had this idea. We talked about it in one of the previous podcasts, where they, the Lady of the Lake.
Yeah.
Okay, the lake is the crater lake. They go down to the bottom.
The cauldron.
They go down to the bottom of the lake. They get the stone that fell from heaven, and from it they forge it into a sword.
That's right.
But if apparently, like this happens, then he becomes king.
Yep.
And then he begins to seek the Grail.
Yeah.
So it's like, I was going to ask you about that.
To me, that looks like an inversion.
Like, well, it may not be an inversion. Like they first find this chunk of a meteor.
Yeah.
And they forge a sword out of it.
Yep.
But they start discovering, okay, it's connected to alchemy, right? So
right.
Merlin,
So you're suggesting that the search for the Grail itself may have come from his experience with.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But it's like they're continuing to do science on this freaking crater and on the stuff that they're finding from the crater. That was seeking the Grail.
Yeah.
They weren't traveling the world looking for it. They knew where it was. They were trying to. So people are traveling the world to take pieces of this thing around to other people who do alchemy to like figure out more stuff about it because there's all this crazy shit going on around this lake.
Yeah.
The Lady of the Lake being, say, Mother Nature, for example, like they may have noticed that all of this crazy stuff was going on around this crater.
Right. So she offers it to them by way of the clues around the lake.
Yeah. There you go.
Of all this crazy badass like wildlife that's happening. Yeah, that's really cool.
So the alchemy part, like obviously the Philosopher's Stone and all that kind of stuff, like it gives you immortality, right? You live forever if you use it. So this is the progression of them trying to discover that all of the secrets that it holds.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing is there is some hint of very ancient knowledge in this because that doesn't just go back to like Christian times or whatever. That it's incredibly. I mean, first of all, the Mahabharata is very, very old.
Yeah.
But how would they know that there was healing in this? Because like it murders everyone that's anywhere nearby. It's like and so you're suggesting that this idea with King Arthur that they're seeing clues. Right. Of course, obviously, they couldn't have been there when the crater was made because everybody would be dead. But
it would have to have been something they were discovering at the time. Like they didn't witness the impact.
Right.
But someone knew what that crater lake was.
Right. It talks about the heathen Flagetanus who saw this in the stars. So we again have this connection with the ancients who were obsessed with astronomy. And whether they were doing it with instruments or naked eye doesn't matter. Like that little part that I read there implies that someone read this in the stars. And not only does he sort of foretell this coming again, but that angels have left it on Earth before.
Right.
Yeah. It reminds me of the Murchison meteor. I think that's how you say it. Murchison meteorite. They found in like 1948 or something like that. And it had amino acids. That's how you say that, right? Amino acids in it.
Yeah.
There were like 74 different amino acids. 55 of them had no known
terrestrial origin.
They were not like anything ever seen on Earth.
Yeah,
Space plankton.
That was the other thing that I thought of as far as the blood raining from the sky.
Yeah.
In the story of Moses leading the people out, right? Well, all the plagues.
Yeah.
Right? So the Nile turns red.
Yeah.
Well, somewhere up there was raining red.
Raining blood,
And then
yeah.
what happens later? The sea departs in front of them, and
Right.
they cross the Red Sea.
That's right. And what happens when you got a big impact? You get.
And why do they call it the Red Sea?
I don't know, that's a good point.
But yeah, we were talking about that, and there's that movie,
Exodus?
yeah, Exodus, I
Yeah.
guess. And that's like he sees the comet,
Yeah,
like, or
he
the
sees
meteor
it.
fly by, and then a little while later, the ocean's just like he wakes up and the water's just going away. Like holy
Yeah.
shit! And it, that could very well happen in an impact that if it would, wherever it was, it creating a tidal wave or whatever.
And the
it
first thing that
draws-
happens in tidal wave is it pulls it all
Right.
away. Yeah. Yep. And it comes back as a wall of fucking water.
Right, and they made it across because they didn't have chariots.
Yep. The other guys are getting stuck in the mud.
Yeah. But there's the Nile turning red right before they leave or whatever.
Yeah. Yep.
So
And
there
then, of
was
course,
some
that
crazy
co-
shit going on.
The Nile turns red, and then there's what's the next one? Is it the flies?
Well,
Then
everything
there's the,
dies.
Then
in
there's the frogs,
Yeah, everything dies in the Nile, and of course, then you're gonna have flies.
and then the frogs
And then
come to
the
eat the
frogs-
flies.
yeah, exactly.
Right, and then they all get boils because everybody's getting sick. Yeah. Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. Crater. The fucking Grail is a fucking crater.
That's badass. Man, you did the perfect timing.
Yeah.
Nice 30-minute segment there.
No, yeah.
I wish it wasn't over. I kind of want to keep talking about this, but
I thought you would like the etymology in that, though.
yeah, love it.
Sangreal, Sangral, Sangreal. Holy cup, royal blood. That's badass.
Yeah,
It's both.
yeah. Look into the etymology of holy.
Yeah.
Try to figure that one out.
It's holy because it's a crater. It's a hole.
Very snaky definition there. All right, folks. That's a wrap.
Yep. Thanks to Laura for the intros. Thanks to Kyle for the badass music. A30 Studios
and
AOX
thanks to Ty
Productions.
for other badass music as well.
That's right. And for the one comment on the blog. Which, by the way, you can comment there. If you want to complain or ask questions or anything like that, you can comment on the blog. It's brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com. You can send us emails at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. I think that's it for this week. Episode 17. Good night, Adamu. Get back to work. Comments?
once for freedom.